It's about time I review Velocicoaster. What's up guys, Dr. Coaster here and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today I'll be proclaiming my love for Velocicoaster and giving an in-depth review of the ride and its overall experience. Before we Mosasaurus roll our way into this review though, if you haven't already, then be sure to drop the video a like, as it helps me fight the YouTube algorithm. While you're at it, subscribe to the channel as well for more roller coaster and theme park content just like this. If you saw my top 10 coasters as of the end of 2021, you know that one coaster stood atop the pack as the apex predator of all the coasters I had ridden to that point. And without a doubt, that coaster was Velocicoaster. This coaster packs equal parts theming, intensity, airtime, and a slew of other positive qualities into one ride, unlike many other coasters on Earth. Universal had a winner on their hands the second they dreamt of this coaster. I mean, churro stand. For those that don't get that reference, Universal refused for the longest time to acknowledge that anything was coming to the park, and teased park guests and enthusiasts on social media, saying that any construction scene was for a new churro stand. Now, they weren't actually being serious, but it was quite hilarious, especially when the park served free churros to park guests during Velocicoaster's opening day. Velocicoaster would be added in front of and around the Discovery Center, making it the first ride to be added to the Jurassic Park section of the park since it was opened to the public in 1999. Universal Orlando would unfortunately have to close its doors for a while due to the coronavirus pandemic, like all other parks. But when guests returned to the park, they were greeted with progress they could have never imagined. Velocicoaster would officially open to the public on June 10th, 2021. Following a successful pass holder preview period, and it instantly received rave reviews from the general public and enthusiasts alike. Even those picky ones that don't seem to like anything. With celebrity star power the likes of Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, and a theme centered around one of the most successful film franchises in the world, Velocicoaster received mainstream attention the likes of which many other coasters never see. Its location at Islands of Adventure in the heart of Orlando, Florida, certainly didn't hurt either. I was unfortunately entrenched deep into an internship for the summer, but I made it down to Orlando as soon as I could. I ended up visiting the second week of August, and I was able to enter the paddock 10 times over the course of 2 days, while still enjoying everything else in both parks. The park was absolutely dead. It was phenomenal. I don't think it's any secret at this point how much I absolutely love this coaster, and I admitted it at the top of the video. So this video will probably end up being more of a love fest than it is an actual review. And I will not apologize for that one bit. I actually had the opportunity to visit Universal Orlando in May of 2019 when this ride was just starting to take form. I was still terrified of coasters at the time and hadn't even experienced my first inversion yet, but it was this trip that I realized one day I would force myself back to Orlando to ride this resort's soon to be epic coaster lineup. Over the next couple of years, and a pandemic to crash my progress to a halt, I would slowly start riding more coasters with the intention of conquering Velocicoaster in 2021. So without further ado, there's only one place to begin when talking about Velocicoaster: theming. Velocicoaster revolves around the Jurassic World film franchise, more specifically, building a roller coaster for Jurassic World guests within and around the famed raptor paddock featured in the original film. Exactly. What could go wrong? You'll be greeted by numerous characters from the film, including Owen Grady, Claire Dearing, Dr. Wu, and perhaps, most importantly, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. DNA. Let me hear you say it.
With real live raptors!
It never gets old. If you aren't already aware of this wonderful phrase, you will be if you spend more than 5 minutes in this queue. And the longer you stay in it, or the more you ride Velocicoaster, the deeper and deeper it'll become ingrained in your soul. The first major theming element you will notice upon entering the queue is the raptor statue at the center of the first room. This centerpiece is also adorned with the model of the top hat found just outside. After circling around this incredible statue, you'll enter into the first room off of the main queue building. Side note, if you're using the single rider line, you will skip over a lot of the theming I'm about to get into, but you'll also spend far less time in line, so it's up to you, but I would recommend heading through the general queue at least once. After entering the first room, you'll be greeted by one of the coolest effects I've ever seen in a queue. One of the launches on Velocicoaster will pass by a set of windows, making up the front wall of this room. Along the side of the windows are pulsing lights that will flash red when the train is about to launch. After the train has passed by, a pack of raptors are projected on the window and run after the train. You'll then continue into the second room, where you'll notice some small yet super detailed thematic elements on display. It's in this room that you will also be greeted by Dr. Wu, where he ensures you that guest safety is a top priority and that these animals are well taken care of despite being used for such an attraction. In the final room before the lockers, you'll encounter what are some of the most realistic animatronics that you will likely ever see. The raptors restrained here blink, snarl, and shake like the real thing. It's incredible. And yes, if you haven't already noticed, 2 raptors have escaped and are missing. If you're craving more interaction with the raptors after seeing these animatronics, then you gotta be sure to check out the raptor encounter found nearby Velocicoaster. However, let's be honest, it's still the second best meet and greet at the resort anyway. Actually, scratch that. It's third. Normally I wouldn't talk about lockers in a video, but Universal has taken its fair share of criticism over the years for their metal detectors being at the entrances of Hulk and Rip Red Rocket versus closer to the coasters themselves. This doesn't allow park guests to bring their phones or cameras into the queues of either ride. With Velocicoaster, it was clear that Universal learned from their mistakes and placed them right at the bottom of the stairs before the final part of the queue. This system was very fluent and super easy to use with its 2-sided system, as long as you remember your locker's color. My mind was so blown after my first experience with the ride that I had to scan at least a solid 3 times to find my locker, but eventually I got there. The lockers and metal detectors will lead you upstairs where you are immediately greeted by Claire and Owen. This pre-show's interaction is pretty hilarious and easily quotable, with lines like, "What could go wrong?" and "They're quicker than you realize," joining Universal lingo alongside, "Nice shades," and "Are you insane?" Claire insists that the park's guest request for more teeth needs to be satisfied, while Owen wishes them luck keeping their fingers and toes, while proclaiming that the hunt is on. From here, you'll exit the elaborately themed queue and enter the station, where you'll be greeted by the sleekest looking trains I have ever seen. The black on silver color scheme with the blue lights really pop, especially at night. And now it's your turn to board them. And just like that, after all the build up, it's time to enter the paddock. You roll into the area between the raptor cages and come to a stop. This is where you'll hear Owen trying to calm down the raptors, whilst the on-ride audio begins to build and the lights begin to flash. Don't blink, because before you know it, you're being launched from 0 to 50 miles per hour in just 2 seconds, during which the scenery around you changes entirely. Go onto the concrete and metal confines of the queue building and station, because you are now surrounded by lush greenery and elaborate rockwork. Oh, and yeah, don't forget about the raptors. Out of the launch, you'll fly through the rockwork for the first time and pull up into an Immelman that gives you a view of the rest of the coaster for the very first time. If you want to take in that view, you better do it quick, because it doesn't last long. You'll then descend out of the Immelman and through more of the breathtaking rockwork. And that's another thing about the environment surrounding this coaster. The clearances of the rockwork appear extremely close to the train as you pass through and around them, providing for some excellent head and arm choppers. With the first pass through the rockwork, you take it pretty straight on immediately out of the launch tunnel, so it didn't cause me to flinch at all, but I definitely flinched going through it for the second time. I avoided almost all spoilers before riding Velocicoaster, so this caught me completely off guard. And before I could completely get my wits about me, I was being sent through a dive loop. I love a coaster that doesn't allow me to think about what's coming next, and Velocicoaster fits that bill perfectly. The dive loop performs well, but that's just the start of the hang time that this ride provides. Immediately after the dive loop, Velocicoaster flies underneath its own supports and snaps you through an overbanked turn, followed by a healthy dose of airtime provided by an off-axis airtime hill. In the same way that the dive loop was just a taste of the hang time to come, this off-axis airtime hill is really just the appetizer for the ejector airtime waiting for you in the next course. You'll dip down to ground level and then straight back through the rockwork once again, setting you up for your first interaction with the stars of the show. Your first encounter with the raptors themselves will be with Blue and Charlie, and it occurs during an S-bend as you dive back down to ground level before maneuvering through the scenery and traversing another overbank turn. This overbank turn is on a much smaller scale, but that's okay, because it sets you up for a snappy S-bend and your second interaction with the raptors, this time just barely avoiding getting nabbed by Delta and Echo. After just narrowly escaping the jaws of Delta and Echo, take a moment to catch your breath, as this is really the only chance you will have to do so. Velocicoaster will traverse some more of the ride's incredible scenery and pass by a viewing area for guests, which is one of my personal favorite spots to photograph. Whether or not you've caught your breath by now, Velocicoaster really doesn't care, because it's time for the second launch. Hold on to your butts, because you're about to accelerate from 40 to 70 miles per hour through the launch's second tunnel in just 2.4 seconds. Many coasters would have called it quits already, but Velocicoaster is just getting started. The second launch will shoot you up to 155-foot tall top hat, reaching both its top speed and height on the ride. This top hat is my favorite element that I've ever experienced on a roller coaster, and I don't take saying that lightly. The launch into it goes without saying, but the views of my favorite theme park from the top are absolutely stunning. I managed to get a sunset ride on Velocicoaster to conclude my trip to the park, and I've been hard pressed to find anything to top that moment since then. Aside from the views, however, where it really gets me is the whip that this thing has. While riding Velocicoaster in the back row, I got folded over my lap bar like a lawn chair, with my legs flying up and my body flying forward. It caught me totally off guard because a lot of coasters similar to Velocicoaster just don't allow for that kind of freedom. The restraints and open trains of Velocicoaster are some of the best out there, and to say that they enhance the ride experience would be an understatement. Now that the love fest over the trains and restraints is over, let's get back to my infatuation with the top hat, because it still drops you 140 feet down at a near vertical angle of 80 degrees. Once you've dove all the way back down to ground level, you will fly past the entrance to the queue and enter a 100-foot long vertical stall that passes over the midway. This stall is the main course in the hang time department. Hanging upside down, you'll be able to interact with guests beneath you. And along with the top hat, this is what greets park guests upon their arrival to Velocicoaster's entrance plaza, which really sets the tone for what lies ahead. Once you are right side up again, you'll enter a drawn out turnaround over the water that really shows off Velocicoaster's speed as it flies past Hogsmeade and over the bridge below. Throughout this sequence, you're going to encounter multiple snappy overbank hills, but the element that really shines is the off-axis airtime hill. The airtime provided by this element is some of the wackiest I've ever experienced. Right up there with the type of airtime Iron Gwazi and Steel Fenders provide. This element ejects you one way and then changes direction mid-maneuver to bring you back down into your seat. You'll then fly back over the bridge for one last interaction with park guests below, before banking to the right to set you up for the finale on Velocicoaster, the Mosasaurus roll. Staring straight ahead of you, you'll see it coming as you get a nice pop of airtime coming over the speed hill. And as you're barely getting back into your seat, it's time for the hang time filled dessert, because the Mosasaurus roll puts a cherry on top of the entire ride and leaves you begging for more. All you'll see is the water beneath you as you swear in the moment that you can just reach out and touch it. The snap that this thing has is something else, and there's not many coasters around that have a barrel roll like this, especially at this rate of speed, because you're going to whip through it at 53 miles per hour. And if you really want to take it up a level, lean away from the direction of the roll before entering it for a wild time. Once you've completed the Mosasaurus roll, you'll turn a couple times and pop up into the final brakes to conclude your ride of Velocicoaster. While pulling back towards the station, you'll hear a voiceover of Owen thanking you for riding before he gets a call over the radio that there's an issue over at River Adventure, leaving you with one last bit of theming and a nod to the other ride just down the midway. I can literally find nothing wrong with Velocicoaster aside from the price you gotta pay to get in the park. I can't wait to get back to Florida later this year so I can keep lapping this beast of a ride. If it wasn't obvious already, I'm giving Velocicoaster a 10 out of 10. There's no other option. I've made it to many new parks over the course of this past year and have ridden a plethora of world-class coasters. But will Velocicoaster hold its spot as my number one coaster? You're gonna have to wait to find out. No! Thank you all for watching. That was my in-depth review of Velocicoaster, one of the 2 Intamin launch coasters located at Islands of Adventure at Universal Orlando Resort. Have you ridden Velocicoaster? Let me know in the comments below, as well as what you thought of it. If you want to flame my obsession with this coaster instead and tear it to shreds, then go right on ahead. If you haven't already, be sure to drop the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well for more roller coaster and theme park content just like this. If you want to follow me on Instagram as well, you can find me at Dr_Coaster. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.